Tonight, crisis at the border. And jobs, jobs, jobs. Job openings and workers quitting hit record highs. What that means for employers. Plus, striking a chord. Russia's foreign minister wrongly suggests Adolf Hitler was Jewish.
It is so deeply offensive to the Jewish people, both in Israel and around the world.
Fraying an already tense relationship between Russia and Israel. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Immigration takes center stage as GOP lawmakers blast the Biden administration's policies. Good evening in Washington. I'm Jenna Browder. Southern border crossings under the microscope on Capitol Hill. This year alone, there have already been 2 million illegal crossings. Today, Biden administration officials were in the hot seat. It was the second day of hearings before the Senate Homeland Security Committee following DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas's testimony yesterday. Republicans have been fierce in their criticism of the administration for allowing these migrants to continue overwhelming the border. The CBN's Tara Merchner joins us now with tonight's top story. Tara?
Well, Jenna, an effort to get answers about the chaos at the southern border brought all the key agencies responsible for its enforcement: Customs, Border Patrol, and Homeland Security. Lawmakers are demanding answers about why there is no progress in controlling the record numbers of migrants crossing illegally into the U.S.
We are talking a lot about whether these numbers are 10-year high, 15-year high, or whatever they are. This year, so far, 2022, it's unprecedented.
Republicans again challenged the administration's efforts to secure the southern border, specifically focusing on plans to lift Title 42 within weeks. That decision likely to double already historic numbers crossing the border due to factors like economic and political turmoil in Latin America, as well as a backlog of people seeking asylum.
What you are saying is that without Title 42, you're going to have a lot more people who come to the border and say, I have a credible fear, and like others, they'll be allowed to come into the country. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay.
According to Homeland Security statistics, Border Patrol officers apprehend about 7,000 migrants each day, a number expected to more than double if and when Title 42, a public health order that prevents migrants from seeking asylum, is lifted. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas has struggled to keep a lid on political uproar during these hearings.
There are already surging personnel, resources, transportation resources to the border. We understand the need to be already in place when Title 42 comes to an end.
The Biden administration's plan post-Title 42 would increase personnel in the border region, use temporary facilities to expand detention capacity, and aggressively deploy what's known as expedited removal to deport those migrants not eligible for asylum. One specific concern centers on an expected surge of unaccompanied minors entering the states.
To make sure that we are taking every precaution, that we are staffed adequately so that there are eyes on our children, that we are using safeguards.
We've just been nibbling around the edges. This is surreal the last 2 days, what we've been talking about here. Nothing that's going to fix the problem until we actually talk about the root cause.
It is possible the court could soon order the government to reverse course and halt plans to lift Title 42 on May 23rd because of lawsuits filed by Republican-led states. Jenna.
All right, thank you, Tara. Well, David Beer is the Associate Director of Immigration Studies at the Cato Institute and an expert on legal immigration, border security, and interior enforcement. And he joins us now. David, welcome. Great to have you on with us this evening. So we see these images coming from the southern border. Would you call this a humanitarian crisis? And what should the administration be doing?
Oh, absolutely, it's a crisis. And the crisis is really caused by this administration and the last one, which decided to close the legal crossing points into the United States. The ports of entry are where people should cross. And since March 2020, with Title 42, and Title 42 was applied at these ports of entry, they blocked all legal crossings into the United States to request asylum. And so we have these border crossings, but people, the vast majority, 85% of all the people crossing the border are trying to turn themselves in to Border Patrol. And that's according to the Border Patrol itself. And so they're trying to apply for asylum. They should not have to cross the border illegally to do so. That creates chaos. That creates the need to arrest them and detain them and do all the other things that are costing the U.S. government so much money. There's a better way to do this, and that's allow them to apply legally. And that is the primary response that the administration should have to this crisis, not spending billions of taxpayer dollars on another border boondoggle.
So Tara reported on the Biden administration's plans if, in fact, Title 42 is lifted on May 23rd. In your view, David, is that plan enough?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, the main focus of this administration after Title 42 is to detain people in these facilities along the border. And then when those facilities fill up, they're planning on releasing them onto the streets in border cities. And that's just going to create more scenes of chaos, more overcrowded facilities, more humanitarian crisis. They need to get back to focusing on legal immigration. How do people come to this country legally? You mentioned it at the top. We have record job openings in this country. We need people. They're going to produce good things. Good economic consequences will come from letting people come to this country legally. They just need to actually do it. They need to have a plan that focuses on that, not on, basically managing a sinking ship.
Comprehensive immigration reform seems to be really out of reach for Congress. Why has this been such an intractable issue for years now?
Because it's become a partisan issue. Several years ago, it was possible to have a bipartisan agreement about a big issue like comprehensive immigration reform. We've totally lost the way on that. Today, it's basically 100% on one side, 100% on the other. They're both so extreme, and they're not focusing on the areas of commonality and areas of focus that would actually fix the problem. They both see it as a positive thing for their electoral campaigns.
Yeah, but that issue and so many others, unfortunately. David Beer with the Cato Institute, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, to the coronavirus, a staggering figure out tonight from the World Health Organization. COVID-19 now responsible for 15 million deaths worldwide over the last 2 years. Here in the U.S., NBC News data shows we've crossed the threshold of more than 1 million deaths. This as cases across the country are on the rise as Omicron and its subvariants continue to spread. More than 62,000 new daily cases reported last week. That's up 46% from just 2 weeks ago. Some experts warn as we head into the summer, cases will continue to rise. The WHO stressing, though, that COVID is not a seasonal disease.
So this perception that respiratory viruses ultimately settle into a seasonal pattern is not true. It depends where you are. It depends whether the population is vaccinated or not. And it depends whether new variants are actually emerging. So there are a lot of factors that still need to play out for us to determine whether this virus is truly going to become a seasonal occurrence.
The WHO reports that though cases are rising, data shows vaccinations are the best way to prevent severe death and disease. Unemployment, inflation, and all things economy. Next on Faith Nation. In economic news tonight, new unemployment claims are up in America. New figures from the Labor Department show 200,000 people applied for jobless benefits last week. That's up 19,000 from the week before. Those unemployment numbers come just one day after a disappointing private sector jobs report. The ADP report showing private payrolls added just 247,000 jobs. That's well below the 390,000 figure the Dow Jones had predicted. Tomorrow, the Labor Department will release the April jobs report. Economic surveys are estimating about 400,000 new jobs will be added. And with that, let's bring in Mark Hamrick, Washington Bureau Chief and Senior Economic Analyst at Bankrate.com. Mark, good to see you this evening. So we have a rise in unemployment, lower than expected private sector jobs report. Is the job market slowing down?
Well, we don't have a rise in unemployment per se. We had more people applying for unemployment benefits in the latest week, still at a remarkably low level. The number of people who are continuing to receive jobless benefits currently at the lowest level since 1970. The population and workforce nearly doubling since then. We may well be seeing a slowing economy, but we're early in the second quarter here to be able to judge that. But the outlook for the full year continues to be that growth should remain above the historical average of 2%. But obviously a lot is in play, and I wouldn't want to make heavy bets on where we end at the end of the year. In the near term, though, the job market looks quite strong. I might want to make a point here, and you touched on the record number of job openings. One person's, let's say, strong job market is a headache for another. So workers have a great deal of job security right now, but that's a real headache for employers, and it ends up being a problem for consumers where businesses are not able to meet their objectives because they can't get the people they want.
Right. The April jobs report expected tomorrow. Mark, what are you expecting with that?
Well, the consensus is that we will get back to the lowest level that we had coming into the pandemic. That was 3.5% in February of 2020, and we had first reached that level in September of 2019. When that happened, that was the lowest level in 50 years. So we'll see, but there is a sense that the unemployment rate can go lower from the previous read of 3.6%.
And we'll all be watching. Let's talk about the so-called Great Resignation. New numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics show 4.5 million people quit their jobs in the month of March. What do you make of that?
Well, this is a number that is watched for all kinds of reasons. And even during, let's say, normal economic times, the so-called quits level is viewed in a sense as a grade card on worker confidence. So people don't quit their jobs in the midst of a recession, because the whole worry then is whether somebody can find employment or hold on to their current job. So that is a measure of job availability. Right now we have essentially 1.9 jobs open for every unemployed worker, at least officially measuring all of that. We don't want to see the quits rate necessarily come tumbling down, but we do need some more, I would say, normality in the job market and the economy as a whole. And of course, inflation is the number one irritant that is bothering people these days for good reason.
Well, speaking of inflation, Bankrate released a new survey on Monday about money concerns and mental health. Tell us what you found in that, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Jenna. Quite remarkable that 4 out of 10 Americans told us that money woes were weighing on their mental health, and that ranked almost as high as anything else that they could give us in the sense of a concern, whether it's global events or worries about their physical health. And of course, the pandemic's still with us. So women tend to suffer from this more than men, younger people and those who have lower incomes, not surprisingly. So I think during Mental Health Awareness Month, we're recognizing what a significant issue this is.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Mark Hamrick with Bankrate.com. As always, so good to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenna.
Russian citizens fed up with the war, becoming refugees. Up next, where they're headed and what they're saying about the Kremlin. Russian President Vladimir Putin has apologized to Israel for anti-Semitic remarks made by the Kremlin's chief diplomat. The Jewish state demanded the apology after Sergei Lavrov called Jews themselves anti-Semitic and claimed Adolf Hitler had Jewish heritage. Chris Mitchell has more on the rhetoric that led up to the apology.
Just days after Israel remembered 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust by Adolf Hitler, Russia's foreign minister Sergei Lavrov said the Nazi leader was part Jewish.
If I remember correctly, I may be wrong, but Hitler also had Jewish origins, so it doesn't mean absolutely anything. For some time, we've heard from the wise Jewish people that the biggest anti-Semites were Jewish.
The statement shocked Israelis and brought swift and widespread reaction. Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett and Israel's Foreign Minister Yair Lapid both condemned Lavrov's comments.
The remarks of Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov are an unforgivable scandal. Hitler was not from Jewish descendants, and the Jews did not kill themselves during the Holocaust. We make every effort to keep good relations with Russia, but there's a limit. This time, the limit has been crossed. The government of Russia needs to apologize to us and to the Jewish people.
Israel rebuked Russia's ambassador, while Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky wondered if Israel would go even further.
So the question is whether the Israeli ambassador stays in Moscow knowing their new position, whether their relations with Russia remain as usual. Because all of this is not accidental. The words of the Russian foreign minister, a great connoisseur of Hitlerism, are not random.
Middle East analyst Eli Cohenim told CBN News Lavrov's comments struck a chord among the Jewish people.
First of all, he has his facts wrong to try to suggest that Adolf Hitler has any kind of Jewish lineage in him. And secondly, it is so deeply offensive to the Jewish people, both in Israel and around the world.
Cohenim says Russia is trying to justify an unjustifiable war.
And the way that they do that is they keep going back to this claim that they are denazifying Ukraine. And what it shows us is that they'll basically say or do anything in trying to justify what they just cannot.
The diplomatic confrontation also presents a military challenge for Israel. Russia controls the airspace over Syria, and Israel depends on Russian cooperation to strike Iranian targets inside Syria. Without Russia's permission, it could see Iran's military presence grow dramatically on its northern border. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thank you, Chris. Well, Russia is expanding its attacks by targeting the western Ukrainian city of Lviv. It comes as Russian forces launched an attack on the remaining Ukrainian fighters holed up in that steel plant in Mariupol. About 200 civilians are believed to be in that plant. Russia said today it would let them evacuate. Meanwhile, in Kharkiv, firefighters put out the flames after a Russian attack on a children's park. Fortunately, no injuries reported. Armenia may be a small country, but with the war in Ukraine, it's seeing a big influx of people. The Asian nation has become a new hotspot for refugees. But the more than 120,000 fleeing to Armenia aren't Ukrainian. They're Russian. Chuck Holton reports on why they're leaving their homeland.
It's springtime in Armenia, and the cherry blossoms have arrived around the capital city, Yerevan. And that's not all that's breaking out here. More than 120,000 Russians have come here since the war began in Ukraine, with more arriving each day. This sudden influx, however, is causing challenges for Armenians as well.
Well, my fiancé and I have been looking for an apartment, and the prices have gone up more than twice, and it's almost impossible to find an apartment in Yerevan. Everywhere the prices have gone up dramatically.
This former Soviet satellite state is one of the few places left where Russians can travel, and up to 40 flights arrive here from Russia every day. Many of the passengers don't plan on going home anytime soon. There are Russians all over here in downtown Yerevan, and I've been talking to many of them. It seems like most of them are young professionals, IT people, things like that, people who do their work online, and that's something that you really can't do right now in Russia because of the sanctions. Also, everybody that I've spoken to has been vehemently against this war, but there's a catch. They don't want to go on camera and talk about it. That says a lot about how much they fear their own government, because most of them still have families back in Russia. Eventually, we found these two young Russians willing to speak out on camera. Can you tell me why you left Russia?
Yeah, because of the war and the Putin dictatorship. So we decided to move. Like, my friends moved to Armenia and I moved to Georgia. And we'll probably won't come back until the government overthrown, but I won't be putting my money on it. But hopefully, someday, maybe.
How do you feel about the war in Ukraine? I'll ask you.
That's awful because this is illegal war, and now Putin make a lot of war crimes in Ukraine. So I'm not agree with the politics of my country, and it's kind of strange feeling when your country goes to war, but you want that your country lose it.
Even if the war ends and Russia loses, I don't see myself living comfortably in a country where the country leader is almost like a Hitler, and the absolutely militaristic state of the government right now is awful.
So far, Armenia has avoided taking a political stand on the war, even though most are horrified at the images coming out of Ukraine.
I think because Ukraine's government supported Azerbaijan during the war in Artsakh, Armenians feel hurt, and they did not really want to support Ukraine. But after, seeing what was happening in Ukraine, of course, we felt bad for the people. And we are trying to be supportive, and we're trying to be open not only to Russians in Armenia, but also to Ukrainians.
Armenians are great with Russians. They totally understand the situation because there was a war in Armenia some time ago. So they are super friendly, and I like this country very much.
Thousands of Ukrainian refugees have landed here as well, which makes for an interesting dynamic in the coffee shops around Yerevan, where refugees from both sides rub shoulders. Still, this Armenian pastor says there's a bright side to this crisis.
They are in a desperate situation. Some of them are depressed, and they don't have hope to go back to Russia. So they are looking forward to stay here for a long time. So this is a very good opportunity for us.
From Yerevan, Armenia, I'm Chuck Holt for CBN News.
Finally tonight, today marks the 71st National Day of Prayer. And this year the event is joining forces with Pray.com to host a prayer gathering for America. This year's theme is about gratitude and exalting the Lord who has established us.
We want praise to infuse heaven with our adoration and infuse us again with being strong and courageous and hope-filled, because Jesus lives and he loves us.
And that's a good word. Well, the prayers for the country focus on 7 centers of influence: the government, media, business, education, church, and the family. The National Day of Prayer Task Force will hold a 90-minute broadcast tonight that will air on the CBN News Channel. You can catch that at 8 p.m. Eastern. And we will see you there. Thank you so much for joining us for Faith Nation. Have a great evening.